Hi, this is Dar Williams, and you are listening to the Your Morning Coffee podcast with my friends Jay Gilbert and Mike Etchart. Weekly music news for the new music business.
From Luminate, the Luminate 2025 mid-year report is here, and we break it all down.
And from Emily White, AI music is going viral, but it's not what fans want.
And from B-Side, everyone's a manager now. Everybody except us, Jay, I think. Not yet. The day is young. We could still be early. Managers by the end of the week. It is early. All right. Well, we are glad you're here. We are going to start episode 259 right about now.
Stand by for transmission.
This is London calling.
Wake up! The revolution is at hand! Your morning coffee is on the air. 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 Standing by. Your morning coffee, the weekly music news for the new music business. It's the highly curated, agitated, advocated, moderated, and liberated digital music information that you need to know. We are your digital music authority. And now from our studios in Hollywood, California, here's your hosts, Jay Gilbert and Mike Etchart.
Down by the gate, pouring out sugar water on a broken plate, and I've dressed up my best dolls to celebrate. You're coming home from the Hummingbird Highway.
And thank you to Dar Williams for that wonderful intro. The song that you're listening to is Hummingbird Highway. That's the first single and the title track from her upcoming album out September 12th. And that's on Righteous Babe Records. That's Dar Williams, Hummingbird Highway. Thank you, Dar.
Yeah, lovely, 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 lovely. Well, you couldn't avoid it. You couldn't help but hear about this CEO and his company head of HR caught on the kiss cam at a Coldplay concert last week. But we found an interesting article about the young woman who actually posted the awkward moment, in case you were wondering why only the 66,000 people there saw it, and then how you saw it.
Yeah,
This explains
There was a great article in the New York Post by Emily Crane, and she talks about this young woman, Grace Springer, a 28-year-old. She filmed that now viral moment where astronomer CEO Andy Byron and his chief human resources officer, Kristen Cabot, they were busted on that kiss cam embracing at the Coldplay concert in Boston last week. That clip has been seen now over 50 million times and climbing.
50 million times. Springer said that she just thought I caught an interesting reaction to the kiss cam and decided to post it with no idea how mega viral it would soon go. She said, a part of me feels bad for turning these people's lives upside down, but play stupid games, win stupid prizes. Yeah.
As Taylor Swift would sing. As Cabot flung her hands over her face and Byron ducked out of view, frontman Chris Martin quipped, either they're having an affair or they're just very shy. Chris Martin later added, I hope we didn't do something bad.
Well, as Springer's clip exploded on social media, online sleuths quickly found that Byron appeared to be married to Megan Kerrigan Byron, while Cabot had recently divorced her husband, Kenneth Thornby. Springer said, I hope their partners can heal from this and get a second chance at the happiness they deserve with their future still in front of them.
Yeah, you couldn't avoid that. And all the memes are absolutely hilarious. You know, all the different people that they're creating in that spot, you know, with AI, and it's taken on a life of its own. So anyway, I want to talk a little bit about behind the set list. The Allman Betts interview is live, and we really enjoyed talking to those two. We had an incredible conversation with Ray LaMontagne, and that's dropping pretty soon. And this week we're recording with Mickey Guyton, all the way from China, and we're going to sit down in person with Zach Brown. So a lot of cool stuff coming on the Billboard Behind the Set List podcast with my good friend and co-host, Glenn Peoples.
And how many have you done now?
We're a little over 70 right now. Wow. Yeah, we've had some incredible conversations, and it's just such a joy. Number one, we do our research on this, but number two, you'd be surprised how many artists haven't really been asked much about the songs they perform live. Like, why do you do these two songs together? And we always go to, setlist.fm and look at sort of the analytics tab and go, oh, well, here's a song you've only played once. Why is that? We've had some really great conversations, and it's just a joy to sit down with these guys. So,
well, and as you know, because we played in bands over the years, there's an art to creating a set list. 100%. And it's got to be up and down, and it's not easy. It's not easy to do it right.
No, it's not. And then there's some artists that just wing it. That they come to the stage not even knowing what songs they're going to play, and then there's some where, of course, you have pyro and video screens, and it has to be exactly a certain way. And then there's some that don't do covers, and some that do some really interesting covers, and there's never any shortage of conversations to be had about people's set lists.
No, absolutely. Well, you and I have been talking this week, or at least texting, about this wonderful video. This is from Rick Beato, who we talk about a lot on the program here. And it's entitled, "I'm Sorry, This New Artist Completely Sucks." And when I saw that, I'm like, wow, that's pretty hardcore. That's pretty harsh.
Yeah.
He usually is, he goes, he doesn't really come out and say something sucks. Well, what it is basically on this video, he introduces Eli Mercer, who's a fictional indie rock artist he actually fabricated using AI tools like ChatGPT and Suno, all in literally just minutes. So on the video, it shows him he generates an avatar and a name via ChatGPT. Comes out Eli Mercer, depicted as a male alternative singer with lo-fi introspective indie vibes.
Yeah, this video, by the way, is in the Your Morning Coffee newsletter. Beato uses Claude to craft the lyrics, and the song's called West Texas Dreams, and it's about a college dropout chasing a novelist's dream in West Texas. He inputs this into Suno to generate two full AI voiced versions of the song, and then he plays them. He repeats the process on another song called No Signal in the Valley. He writes the lyrics, right? Well, he writes them. He uses Claude to create them. And then Suno generates two versions of that, exploring themes of digital detox and self-discovery.
Now, he's not loving this. In fact, he's criticizing the process. Yeah. He says, AI simply reassembles human-created music. No creative struggle or real artistry is involved. And he warns that Spotify is monetizing something similar AI-generated content, fake artists that fill playlists and dilute real musicians' streams. Yeah. And, in the video, near the end, he also asserts self-creative artists should be compensated, and Spotify should reject fully AI-generated music from monetization.
Yeah, you and I are huge fans of Rick Beato, and we watch these videos. They're so good. And you can see the link in Your Morning Coffee, and you really should subscribe to Rick Beato's YouTube channel. But really interesting stuff. There was another story this week that you and I were talking about. It was in Music Ally, which we like a lot over in the UK. And the headline was Splash's Tracy Chan, quote, "It feels like generational shift is happening." And Tracy Chan is a friend of ours. He's the CEO of AI-powered music social gaming platform Splash. You may remember him from SoundCloud.
Indeed. So Chan described the big shift that he sees happening right now as Gen Z and Gen Alpha seeing themselves primarily as creators, he said. 68% of young people now see themselves as creators. Gen Z and Gen Alpha have all grown up with mobile phones, with social tools, with games, and they all consider themselves content creators because they can do it and because they have a network spreading and distributing.
Yeah, this is super important. And you and I talk about this a lot, how today's youth are becoming the creators. They're not content to just sit back and listen like maybe we did when we were younger. So in this piece from Music Ally, they ask, are DSPs wondering how they're going to convince teenagers to pay for streaming when it seems that they don't want to? Tracy Chan said, what streaming has conditioned us to think is of music as a background activity. So no wonder it's highly unmonetized because it's not in the forefront of activity. The video game industry is 8 times bigger than the music industry. Video games are so much more monetizable and valuable than an asset like music that everyone loves because they are a foreground activity. Super interesting piece.
Yeah.
Music Ally.
Very interesting. Thought-provoking.
Yeah, 100%.
Sure. Hey, before we get into the big stories, Jay, what do you say we thank our sponsors? Really, really appreciate all of their help.
Let's start with Hypebot. Since 2004, Hypebot has chronicled the new music industry and the trends and technologies that are changing how music is discovered, consumed, marketed, and monetized. It's edited daily by our friend Bruce Houghton with help from Alana Bonilla. Hypebot and sister blog Music Think Tank are both published by live music discovery and marketing platform Bands in Town.
You betcha. Bands in Town. Over 90 million live music fans trust Bands in Town to get personalized concert alerts, recommendations, and messages from their favorite artists. It's the #1 artist service platform, connecting over 650,000 artists with their super fans. Managers, labels, agencies, and artists access their own dashboard to manage and promote their tour dates across all platforms, and that is always on my first page on my phone.
Yeah.
And I love having it there. So, and every week I get to hang out with, yes, this guy right here, Jay Gilbert, music industry consultant, curator of the weekly Your Morning Coffee newsletter, and a former executive with Universal Music, Sony Music, and Warner Music Groups.
Yes, sir. And I get to do this show every week with my good friend Mike Etchart, longtime host of Sound and Vision Radio, formerly of SST Records, Warner Music, Capitol and EMI, and Universal Music Group. And typically before we hit record, we talk for an hour about guitars and documentaries and what's going on in the industry. And it's a lot of fun, and I look forward to it every single week.
Yes, indeed. Well, let's jump into the stories. Yes, the Luminate 2025 mid-year report is here from Luminate CEO Rob Jonas. Midway through 2025, our focus at Luminate remains squarely on the intersection of growth and disruption within the music industry. He says, undoubtedly, the past 6 months have already delivered an abundance of both.
Right. Rob goes on to say that, from LA to Tokyo, New York to London, and everywhere in the music industry, 2 questions consistently emerge. Where is the next wave of growth coming from? And is AI an enabler or a disruptor in this evolving landscape? Our 2025 mid-year music report directly addresses the first question and sets the stage for a deeper exploration of the second.
Let's talk about streaming. So in the U.S., on-demand audio streaming grew by 4.5%. That's in the U.S. Ex-US, on-demand audio songs streamed increased by 12.5%. And then globally, on-demand audio streams grew by 10.3% to 2.5 trillion in 2025. Yes, trillion with a T.
That's right. Growth across the board there, US, ex-US, and global. So streaming accounted for 92% of music consumption in the United States in the first half of the year. Top 5 U.S. genres for streaming are R&B/hip hop, rock, pop, country, and then Latin. The highest growth genres, rock, Latin, country, Christian gospel, and blues.
When you talk about the U.S. current versus catalog, the U.S. current music, remember that's 18 months old or newer in terms of on-demand audio. It actually declined by a little over 3% early here in 2025. Country music grew the most, though, up a little over 8% in current on-demand audio streaming volume, while R&B hip-hop declined the most, down about 9.2%.
Right. The report talks about superfans and superfan engagement, and it states that in April, Luminate began tracking music consumption data from Epic Games, and that created a new data category, interactive on-demand streams. So between April and July of 2025, there were nearly 197 million global interactive on-demand streams that were tracked.
Right. And talking about U.S. gamers, an interesting stat, 32%, that's almost a third, of Gen Z gamers discover new music via video games. So millennials are generally considered to be between 29 and 44, while Gen Z individuals are between 13 and 28 years old. And we have some Gen Zs in our families, don't we?
Yeah, that's an incredible stat. A third
really is.
discover new music. That's incredible. So something near and dear to our hearts, podcasts. 50% of U.S. podcast listeners are Gen Z or millennial, those groups that Mike just pointed out. Genres over-indexing for podcast listening are punk, dance electronic, Afrobeats, and 37% play new albums within the first week of release.
That's also very interesting, yeah. And of course, the report mentions something near and dear to our hearts, music documentaries. And the interesting stat, Becoming Led Zeppelin is the top music documentary in the U.S. so far in 2025, driving a sustained 23% increase in the band's streaming.
Oh, yeah, we love that documentary, and we talked about it on the show. That documentary release, it drove Led Zeppelin to its highest ever weekly total for on-demand audio streams, over 40 million the week ending 2/27. And it really only covered a very small portion of the beginning of Led Zeppelin's career. There could be many others,
first two
right?
albums. Yeah, absolutely. But it was a great documentary, of course, and so many of these are great. And there's been a wonderful template that somebody did for the first music documentary, but it's as we talk a lot about, it's so interesting to see how the sausage is made and see the inner band dynamics and all of the things that happen along the way. And in the case of the Led Zeppelin documentary, again, it was really it was their rise, how they became the band that they ended up, we recognize and know. It's so fascinating. It's great stuff. And I can hardly wait for the Billy Joel documentary that's actually coming out this weekend.
One coming out is going to be good. And in this report, they list the top 10 documentaries so far. And you and I have seen most of these. There's a couple of them on here that there's one on Luther Vandross called Never Too Much that I haven't seen that I want to see. And then there's also one called The Only Girl in the Orchestra. But on this show, we've talked about the Beatles documentary, Yacht Rock, Tom Petty, The Greatest Night in Pop, etc. There's some really good ones. I'm such a big fan, you are too, of documentaries. So it's really cool that this is included in their report. There were a few other U.S. music business stats in the report, but before we jump into them, they're based on what they call TEA and SEA. And for those that with no prior knowledge, just to lay this out, TEA equals track equivalent album. What that means is like for every track, 10 tracks that you download, that equals an album. And SEA is more about streaming, and that's called streaming equivalent albums. And the Billboard 200 includes two tiers for audio streams. Tier 1 is for paid audio streams, right? So when you're paying for your subscription. So that equates to about 1,250 streams equals one album. But tier number 2 is ad-supported or free streaming, and that requires more, of course. And so that equates to about 3,750 streams to equal one album unit. And the reason I bring that up is because you're about to touch on some of these stats, and they talk about TEA and SEA.
So in the U.S. music business, the U.S. total album consumption, that's albums plus track equivalent albums plus streaming equivalent albums on demand audio, that increased almost 4% to 558.9 million in 2025. The U.S. total album sales, which is physical plus digital, declined 6% to 41 million in 2025. However, if you exclude all Taylor Swift products, it's actually up 1.9% to 40.2 million.
Yeah.
It's interesting that we do that for album sales. And things.
And we got that from Jamie Markinette, who we'll talk about in a moment. We dropped a special episode with Jamie to break down this report. But just to sort of wind this down, physical album sales declined by 3.2%. And again, if you exclude all Taylor Swift products, it's 5.5% up. And digital downloads, not really a thing much anymore, declined by almost 18%. And again, listen to our conversation with Jamie Markinet. That's Luminate's VP of Music Insights and Industry Relations. He's a friend of the podcast, and we did a special bonus episode with him that is out now. And lately, we've been doing that every 6 months. This is the mid-year report, and hopefully we'll get him back on for the year-end report.
Yes, absolutely. It was a wonderful conversation we had with him, though.
Yeah.
We had a good time doing that. All right, Jay, let's jump into our next story. It is entitled Everyone's a Manager Now. It's from Maria Picard over at B-Side. Maria's article discusses the generational divide in the music industry, specifically focusing on the difference between traditional industry professionals and the new wave of music business graduates. It highlights the evolution of music business education and the changing expectations of artists and managers in the industry. An absolutely interesting and fascinating article. And, and it wraps up a couple of things we talk about a lot, which is just all of the demands on just management in general, but also all these great young people that are being kind of thrust into the business from these music schools.
Yeah, and just the varying experience that you have from sort of the old school managers to some of these new younger people. Mm-hmm. And it's really interesting. I belong to an artist management collective, and there are some managers that have artists that are playing 200 cap rooms, and there's some that fill up arenas. And in the daily work that I do, I work with a lot of artist managers, and there are different skill sets from, an older artist manager who typically had a label that did things for him and is really good at, touring and merch and sync licensing and, things like that, brand partnerships. But the new wave of artist managers that this article touches on is so fascinating because they are multifaceted, and they're into short form video, and they're into social media and all sorts of different things. So Maria goes on to write that the music industry is experiencing a significant generational shift, and that's characterized by contrasting experience and skill sets between seasoned professionals and new entrants, and she's talking about artist managers. The traditional music professionals who gain their experience through hands-on experiences are now encountering this new generation that's well-versed in digital tools, online platforms. This creates a disconnect in communication, expectations, and the understanding of success in the music industry. This article really emphasizes the impact of this divide, on the music business education, and the roles of managers, booking agents, and public relations professionals.
Maria goes on to say the music industry has always been defined by reinvention, but never has the divide between generations felt so sharp. On one side are the old school professionals who learn the business through years of trial, error, and late night negotiations in backstage green rooms. On the other, a generation of newly minted graduates and online course enthusiasts, fluent in digital tools, data dashboards, and tech overall. One side earned their stripes in clubs and tour vans, the other in Zoom webinars and TikTok.
She goes on to say that the problem isn't that one is right and the other's wrong. It's that they're both speaking completely different languages built on completely different assumptions about what success means and how to get there. Nowhere is this generational dissonance more obvious than in the world of music business education and the shifting role of managers, booking agents, and public relations people. As the methods of teaching change, so do the expectations of artists, and the very definition of what it means to quote unquote manage a music career is breaking apart.
Indeed. So she talks about the evolution of music business education. For generations, the music business was mastered in the field through mentorships, unpaid internships, on-the-road projects, and label apprenticeships. By the 1970s, roughly 60% of the U.S. graduates had interned at a company, a number that shrank to 17% by 1992 as internships became more of a checkbox than a launch pad. These early experiences not only only transferred theoretical knowledge, but built instinct, resilience, and networked know-how, qualities no classroom could replicate.
Yeah, very well written. Institutions like Berklee College of Music, which began offering formal music business programs in the late 80s and extended that into their highly successful Berklee Online branch back in 2001. Today, Berklee Online offers over 250 courses, bachelor's and master's degrees, and educates roughly 18,000 students every single year, amounting to over 75,000 alumni across 164 countries to date. While the brand carries prestige, it also reflects a shift. A December 2024 New York Post opinion argues that music grads, while adept in theory, often enter the labor market unprepared for real industry work, noting that 75% of the new jobs still require a degree, yet some graduates lack the street skills and network essentials in music.
Right. Yeah, so she says music business graduates begin their search for employment with a shiny new degree, only to find that the music industry doesn't inherently require a formal college education for success. She says simultaneously, a boom in online music business education has transformed learning into a scalable, lucrative product. The global online music education market, estimated at $3.8 billion back in 2024, is projected to soar anywhere between $13 to $60 billion by 2032 to 2034. Surveys suggest that up to 67% of music professionals view upskilling as essential.
That's right. This surge masks deeper issues, though. Massive enrollment numbers and MOOC-like scalability. Berklee Online alone reported 3.1 million MOOC enrollments last year, and that can lead to a disconnect between academic learning and hard-won craft of industry practice. What's even worse is dozens, of course, creators of 3 to 5 years in the industry are selling quote-unquote authority without proven impact, flooding the market with empty promises.
Right. She says the consequences are tangible. Surveys from the UK's Higher Education Authority show average music graduate revenues 15 months after graduation hover between £19,000 and £26,500, marginally increasing to £22,000 to £23,500 after 5 years. Hardly the trajectory for those expecting fast-track management careers. In the U.S., early career music business grads report median salaries of around almost $40,000 initially, rising to $51,700 within 5 years. Not exactly a windfall for all those tuition dollars.
Right. And they have a screen grab in this article that cracked us up, and it was deleted at some point, but it was on Reddit. And this person wrote, "Buddy got a degree in music. He works at Costco now." The role of music managers has ballooned beyond traditional scope, yet compensation and structure have failed to catch up. According to a 2024 survey by the UK's Music Managers Forum of 176 members, 60% of managers earn less than a full-time wage, and a staggering 56% make under £10,000 annually, while 21% earn nothing at all. Even more telling, only 26% contribute to a pension, and there's a 50% drop in apprenticeship opportunities since 2019. So as a result, we have managers who are working harder than ever, but many can't build a sustainable livelihood or a career.
Wow. What's driving burnout isn't a lack of effort. It's the eerie weight of responsibilities. The MMF reports that 85% of managers handle label and release strategies, 76% manage social media, 65% oversee PR, 57% coordinate tours, 48% manage finances, and 23% tackle legal issues. These roles were once delegated across departments, but today they're piled up under lean management teams. Many managers have become quasi-label heads, booking, marketing, analytics, sponsorship. You name it, all of it.
100%. I mean, the lines have blurred between the roles and responsibilities of a label, a manager, and I would even argue a distributor these days. Those lines have blurred. In theory, this expanded workload should translate to higher earnings or at least equitable remuneration. But the reality is a relic of the past. The standard 20% commission model still reigns. As Music Managers Forum Vice Chair Kwame Quayton remarked, this model doesn't feel sustainable. For all the opportunities and responsibilities opened up through digital innovation, it's clear that the majority of managers are still paid on commission-based business models.
Right. I'm not convinced that's sustainable and think we need a wider industry discussion around how managers are compensated in order to ensure artist and songwriter businesses can thrive in the future. Many of us have already started cutting deals that reflect our current environment. Meanwhile, some managers attempt to adapt, introducing retainers, fixed fees, joint ventures, or extended sunset clauses. But such flexible contracts are exceptions, not the norm. It's a temporary solution for the broken system.
Right. And she goes on to say that the data reveals the stakes. Live music, traditionally the bread and butter of both artist and manager, have become fragmented. A report notes that live events, publishing advances, royalties, and streaming make up managers' revenue hierarchy. Yet, despite their core support in these sectors, most managers lack ownership stakes in these income streams, forcing them to reinvest profits and cash flow into their own pockets. 74% have dipped into personal savings to fund artist development.
The problem isn't just compensation, it's sustainability. While under half of the UK managers making a middle-class living, the industry risks decrease of mid-level professionals. The MMF warns that rising demands without fair remuneration could lead to a talent exodus. Meanwhile, the decline in internships, down 50% since 2019, severely limit the next generation's exposure to the complex realities of management.
Right. So in the end, the issue isn't just education, it's erasure. The long game wisdom of previous generations being replaced by fast-track systems that reward confidence over competence and visibility over value. Music business education, while more accessible than ever, often skips the part where you earn your way into the room. And instead of teaching students to act like they already belong there, that's why we can now see a growing number of undertrained professionals and overconfident intermediaries who look good on paper but struggle in practice, and who've reshaped the power balance in artists' careers as a result.
Right. She says the generational gap is real and it's affecting everything from how artists are managed to how managers are paid to what kinds of careers are even possible in this version of the industry. If we don't reintroduce respect for experience, mentorship, and practical training, we're not just losing knowledge, we're using the culture that held the business together in the first place.
Right. Wow. This is so important. And you and I had a conversation a while back about how when we were in college, they didn't have a lot of music industry programs. Now it seems like they're everywhere, and some of them are really good. I'm actually taking a course right now in AI, and for lifelong learners and curious people, there are always these tools that you can learn from and learn about. But this article is super important because it's something that we talk about frequently, that there's a big difference between sort of theory and actual, doing of things. And some of these great music business programs that I've worked with and that you've worked with and that we've spoken to, some of them are just amazing. And the reason they are is they don't just read from a book. They do, then that's important. But they bring in experienced people to do guest lectures and to show them about songwriting and touring and merch and sync and all sorts of things. And so it runs a gamut, right? There are some of these programs that are absolutely incredible. And then there are some where students might not be learning the things that they need to learn, and maybe come out a little bit more cocky than they should be, where, they need to learn from experienced professionals.
Yeah, absolutely. And then as we've talked many a time, out of all of the jobs I started at major music companies, none did a true onboarding. An explanation of the business, of where this company was in the realm of the business, and what departments do what, and who heads. And nobody did any of that, and you just get thrown in the water.
You sink or swim.
And you sink or swim.
Yeah, that happened to me. I worked at Universal for 18 years, and I just was dropped in, and I was so excited to have the gig. I had just spent 5 years at Tower Records, and I was working for a major, and I was so excited about it. I was like a sponge. I was being paid to go to school. And, if you're excited about it and you're willing to learn, and I was very fortunate. I had a great mentor in Bob Schneiders, and I learned so much. But if you can be curious and hardworking and show up early, stay late, you can write your own ticket. But yeah, this article really hit home for me because of the fact that not only is there a difference between experienced managers, old school managers, and some of the new younger managers, but there's also so much that they touch on in this article that a new manager is responsible for that an older manager didn't have to deal with 10, 15, 20 years ago. It's really remarkable. So fantastic piece. We're going to jump into our last story, which is by Emily White. And the headline is AI music is going viral, but it's not what fans want. And I thought this was a really well-written piece. Emily writes that streaming is cracking. She says that AI slop is flooding the feed. Artists are getting squeezed, but fans don't want more music. They want music that matters. At the turn of the music streaming era, she said that she had put out an article that was the quiet part out loud, that people who grew up downloading music for free weren't going to start paying to own it. She was ahead of her time with that statement, but many would pay for access, she said, and they did. Renting access to music became the norm.
Right. She says, as a fan, I asked for convenience and I got it. The experience of instantly listening to whatever you want, whenever you want, and seamlessly sharing music globally is incredible. But she says it came at a cost. Today, she says, I feel the tension building again. The seams of the streaming ecosystem are splitting, and we're on the brink of another major shift in how we listen to and connect with music.
Right. Emily writes that streaming is cracking. She says streaming squeezed passionate music fans, mass music listeners, superstars, and working musicians into a one-size-fits-all model. Now it's breaking down. As more music than ever floods streaming services and revenue growth slows down a bit, it's a race to the bottom.
Right. Artists are now competing with AI-generated songs and fake artists for a slice of the same pie, getting squeezed for shrinking returns as the value of each stream keeps decreasing. The broader music ecosystem is also in trouble. Music has become infinite but forgettable. Discovery is a lottery. Touring is unsustainable. Fan relationships are mediated by opaque algorithms, and there is no safety net.
Right. She goes on to say that for passionate music fans, the cracks are starting to show. Streaming music feels repetitive and bloated, a flattened grid devoid of magic and context. And AI slop is here. AI-generated songs already have millions of streams and are being recommended in algorithmic playlists.
Right. The Velvet Sundown, who we've talked about, an AI-generated rock band, has over 600,000 monthly listeners on Spotify and is on all of their major streaming platforms. A soul song without a soul made with Suno. A Million Colors is the first known AI song to chart on TikTok with over 1 million Spotify streams. Aventus, a dark country project, is harnessing the creative power of AI, as they said, according to its Spotify bio, has over 1 million monthly listeners.
Yeah, we played a bit of that on the show last week. She talks about the Amazon basics of music. The truth is AI-generated music will be good enough for a lot of listeners, and corporations are incentivized to promote it. Infinite content at zero marginal cost? ? A business dream. We've already seen this play out with fake artists, also known as perfect fit content. Tracks commissioned at cheaper rates for playlists and listed under pseudonyms, covered extensively in Liz Pelly's Mood Machine, that functional music. And you and I had Liz on the podcast to break all that down.
Indeed. So meanwhile, she says all three major labels are simultaneously suing and negotiating licenses with the generative AI music startups Suno and Udio. It's a moment that feels familiar to the late 90s when CD growth was slowing, prices were shooting up, and consumers were fed up. Then Napster came.
Yeah, but Napster solved fan problems, right? Free access, no gatekeepers, only the songs you wanted. AI music solves corporate problems. It's cheaper, doesn't get sick or old or pregnant, can't complain about pesky royalties or have opinions about the world.
She says, why not substitute art by humans with an imitation at a lower cost? If people like it and the result is all the same, who cares? But AI is not just riffing off of culture, it's parasitically built on top of it, without consent or compensation.
Yeah, she goes on to write that AI-generated music will be good enough for background listeners, but for the people who care about the experience of fandom, the quote-unquote Amazon basics of music isn't satisfying. And she talks about music that matters by saying that streaming may be a background activity, but being a music fan is a lean forward one, and it can define your whole life.
Right. She says, I don't buy the idea that people simply care less about music today. If you think I'm wrong, look closer. Music culture is happening everywhere, but it's fragmented across Reddit threads, DIY shows, fan remixes and mashups, independent record stores, Discord channels, group chats, independent radio stations, live streamed music reviews, and substacks of niche playlists.
Right. She says that fans spend hundreds on live shows, vinyl, or merch for all sorts of non-obvious reasons to signal identity, taste, and support. Vinyl sales have risen for 18 years straight. Half of the purchasers don't even own a turntable, and independent artists now account for half of all streams. Even pop has gotten weirder and more niche-filled.
Fans are spending $300 plus just to see their favorite artist perform live and sometimes going into debt to do so. Ticketing companies are raking in the profits, but what fans are really paying for is access to the artist's world, experiences, and story. She says, anecdotally, I routinely walk past a Polish community center turned 1,000 capacity music venue in my neighborhood, and I see a line of young people camped out all day to get a good floor spot to see artists I have never heard of before.
Right. She says that my old college radio station has doubled in size in the last decade, but the young, passionate music fans I follow and speak to every day are feeling uneasy about the future of music. They use streaming services reluctantly, but supplement with vinyl collections and are ditching streaming altogether. These aren't just scattered behaviors. They're signals of a latent demand. We don't need more music. We need music we care about.
Right. She says music is no longer scarce, but meaning, storytelling, and world building are. Music that matters and AI aren't necessarily at odds. In the right hands, AI can enable new, immersive, and interactive creative experiences without shaking down artists and stripping songs for parts. But the systems in place today incentivize flooding platforms with slop, optimizing for scale over depth, and cutting artists out of the loop.
Right. She says that music lovers don't need AI stock music. We need new experiences that work with artists and for fans, building a new home for music culture. The next great platform for music won't be a streaming service. It'll be a home for music culture.
Right. The rise of AI-generated music will spark a counterculture renaissance built by and for music lovers, where artists, curators, and the most passionate music fans build worlds, share their taste, trade musical lore, and create culture together.
Yeah. She finishes this by saying that a sustainable, profitable business that puts money in the pockets of artists and tastemakers, that succeeds with its users, not at their expense, because the future of music belongs to artists and fans, not AI, not billionaire oligarchs.
Right. Technology changes the tools. Artists and fans change the culture. Together, they reshape music. We are on the edge of a format shift again. She says, join me here as we imagine and create what comes next. Well, what a lovely and well-written article.
Yeah, one of my favorites that I've that I've read in quite a long while, and this is one that I printed out. I'm going to save this. I thought all the stories this week were really, really good. But thank you, Emily White, for that thoughtful piece. You can read the whole thing in your morning coffee. Again, the headline was AI music is going viral, but it's not what fans want. Thank you, Emily.
Yeah, really, really good effort. And it's time to wrap up the show, Jay. It goes so fast, so fast. If you do enjoy the show, please tell one friend. Jay and I would certainly appreciate it. So big thanks to our good friends over at Hypebot and Bands in Town for helping us with it every week. We certainly appreciate it. And big thanks for the Licorice Quartet, 3 of the 4 Jellyfish members who gave us the songs underneath our sponsors. So we do certainly appreciate that. So thanks for listening in, and Jay and I will be back next week on the Your Morning Coffee Podcast.
You've been listening to Your Morning Coffee, the weekly music news program for the new music business. Join Jay Gilbert and Mike Etchart next time for the digital music news you need to know.